I'm on a 30-year tour. I've always got events coming. This could be evergreen.
Off season. Yeah.
Do you like being on the road? Do you like being out and about? Or is it kind of like now this grind? I did about 5 seconds ago. So we're good.
Fit Seekers, Zach Ziegler, Frank Seppi. We are on with psychic medium and my good friend, John Edward. What's up, John?
Nice to meet you, Zach. Frank,
Nice to meet you. Now, I got a question. You said you were on the road for 30 years, a 30-year tour. Do you dread going on the road at this point? Is it a drag, or do you still enjoy being out and about?
Okay, so I've been doing this now. This is my 40th year. I started in 1985. I've been consistently touring for 30 years. I'm about ready to hit my share years, where I'm going to start calling it my first farewell tour. I love what I do, but here's the funny thing. When I was a kid, I would be standing in my grandmother's house with my back up against where the keys used to get, like, you hang the keys up when you come in. Yeah. With a level of dread that I had to drive to a person's house to do a house party. And my grandmother used to say all the time, the sooner you go, the sooner you come back. And then I'd be fine. Yeah, I'd be fine when I was doing it because I love what I do. Do I love the travel? I don't. Do I love leaving my family and my kids? I don't. Right. But I have an affirmation that I remind myself, because in almost every place that I go, I'm going to meet a family that lost a child. I get to go home to mine. They don't get to go home to theirs. So if I could shine a light somewhere that's dark, then it's worth getting on the plane and the travel and the hecticness. It's a journey. It's tiring, but I love what I do.
I've been on tour with you in Australia.
Yes.
It was fun. I like the reference to Cher, because you come out and be like, do you believe in life after death? But honestly, I loved going to Australia with John. John gave away $125,000 to the Schneider's Children's Hospital at the time for a microscope that they needed. That was pretty good for me. I don't even know what I had for breakfast, so that's pretty good. You gotta give me props. A lot of people have this stereotype of psychics or whatever, and I watched him work, and let me tell you, he never ever took an easy way out on people. People like John would be like, I feel like someone had a presence here, gunshot, and 6 people raised their hand. He's like, no, not you, not you, not you, not you, and not you. We're waiting like 10 minutes, and I'm like, man, he should have picked the 6 people. And like, there was somebody way in the back who was afraid to raise their hand, and I was like, wow, this is very interesting. If you have not seen a show, it's really good. I mean, obviously, if you have lost relatives or whatever, it's a tearjerker. It is.
Yeah.
But it's great. It's very entertaining. Thank you for having me, John, on that tour.
I have very fond memories in various ways. The reality is that we're kind of in the same line of work. It's about making a change for someone. So you're working on physical fitness. I'm working on spiritual fitness. Oftentimes I'll be doing an event and I'll say, I have a really good friend. His name is Frank Seppi. He's top in his field when it comes to fitness. I've been around him when somebody comes up and asks him a question like, how do I lose weight here? And he'll turn around and say, you can't spot reduce. That's liposuction. It's got a 3-part process. You got to change your diet. You have to use some type of resistance. You have to do cardio. Basically, you have to get healthy overall to achieve the result that you want. And I kind of feel the same way when it comes to my world, where I'm trying to get somebody to be empowered. I'm trying to get them to be empowered through loss, or they might be suffering through something. Maybe there's some type of life crisis that's taking place. How do they understand who they are, where they are, how they got here? What's the motivation, the intention? And more importantly, what are the options that they can shift to get out of here? No easy fixes, no magic wand. Everything's hard work. But if you put the work in, then you can achieve a result.
So there's 2 things. One, I want to know how you and Frank got to know each other. I think that's important for me to understand, because he has been mentioning you to me for a really long time. I seriously feel like I know you. This is cool. But also, I want to talk about something Frank mentioned before, the stigma of what it is that you do and your abilities. It's almost like a comedian where people go up to them and say, make me laugh. Be funny. I'm sure a lot of people come up to you or tell me something. And does that get annoying, or is it just you've grown to expect it in your profession?
Well, the cool part about traveling with Frank is that nobody did that, because they had more questions for him than for me. And I was like, oh, this is like really cool. Like people would be like, oh, I like your show. Okay, now on to you. I was like, oh, this is cool. It depends on how I'm approached. If somebody's approaching it in a certain way, like, you look familiar, I'm like,
Oh
I
God.
never, but
Just one of those
no.
faces.
But like if somebody's got like a serious question and they're going to ask me that question, I might have answered that question legitimately 100,000 times before, but it's the first
Yeah.
time this person's asking me, and I'm going to answer it for them in the moment that we're having, because that could be the difference between what they do next, and that's important to me.
That responsibility that you're carrying with you, it's a lot.
It is a lot. It is definitely a lot. I've been doing this before it was popular. I feel like I helped make it mainstream.
Mhm.
And one of the things that the people that have come up since, they don't get the same level of attacks that I actually went through. There's a medium by the name of Alison Dubois. She was the woman that the show Medium was based on. When she and I first spoke over the phone, she actually made me emotional. I don't even know if she knows I was emotional because we were on the phone. And when I get emotional, my voice cuts out. I become like Mike Myers from SNL. I get all verklempt and I can't speak. But she said, it's very nice to talk to you, but I have to say thank you to you. I think it's really important that you hear that. And I was like, for what? She said, well, if there wasn't a you, there couldn't have been a me. And she goes, and somebody like you, when they, break the glass ceiling type of, you don't do that without getting cuts and scars. So thanks for doing that so people like me can come after. And I was like, I didn't know I needed to hear that. It was a kind of cool validation. So I'm always the person to do that for people that came before me. I'm always going to acknowledge the George Andersons or the Char Margolises or the Suzanne Northrops, the Shelley Pecks, the people that inspired me to do what I do. But I hadn't really had somebody, do that to me. It was just cool to hear. Yeah. So it's now mainstream in a good way, but in a different way. I tell people it's really important to have a critical mindset, to be a critical thinker. Just because somebody has the word psychic in front of their name doesn't mean that they're legit or real. Today, I'm battling so many scams. So many people are doing photos of me and they Zoom with je@gmail.com and people are falling for it. So it's a little bit frustrating. People got to be careful. Most of the people that I see on TikTok, I block. Like, I didn't want to see it. I want to see pranks and dogs. I don't want to see psychic readings.
No, exactly. We met in 2003. I had a book coming out with the same publisher as John did called Hay House. At that time, the CEO said, hey, he said, I know this guy, John Edward. He lives near you. I go, where's he live? Long Island. I'm like, Long Island? Where he could live in,
No, I actually said to him,
Montauk.
I said, in all the life coaches that you have in the publishing that you guys do, is there anybody that's fitness related that maybe I can work out with? Because, weight for me has always been something that I've struggled with. I'm up, I'm down. And they said, yeah, I got a guy that's right near you. And I said, where? And he said the same thing to me. He's like, Long Island. I go, Long Island from Manhattan to Montauk is like over 3 hours. So you get down.
Right.
And he told me where Beth Francis's gym was. I'm in Huntington. That's 20 minutes from me.
I remember we met at the counter at Bev's. John's father was a police officer. My father was a police officer. John has an Italian side of the family. I have an Italian side of the family. So many similar things. We trained, and John, like me, there's a vibe and a feeling where you just don't gel with people, but we gel. It's very uncommon. And I remember going back to John's house. John was like 10 minutes from there. He was getting something for I don't know what it's from the Hay House, whatever. And he's like, oh, that's my son. His son was a baby. And he was in the living room and he's like, I'll be back in a minute. And I'm like, I just met this guy. And he left me his son. I've never been around babies. Now that his son is like 22 years old and he's like this man child. But I remember the first time I'm like, yeah, I met John. He's an awesome guy. And I was telling my ex-wife at the time, I'm like, yeah, and I met his son. She's like, he left you alone with his son? You won't even hold the baby? I'm like, yeah. I go, I guess he knew. But then we became good friends, and throughout, 22 years later, here we are, John.
Yeah,
Honestly,
and Frank actually coined a phrase in my world that's now used by anybody that knows me. I had done a number of tours. Like I was on the road, and then I came home and I did a Long Island event. I had a night of readings, and it was at a time crossing over was happening. So, long story short, I came in the morning to train with Frank. He was putting me through training, and I was just dragging. He goes, "You know what? I get it. You have a death hangover." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "You have a death hangover. All the afterlife readings you're doing, you got a death hangover." He goes, I'm going to treat it as such. It went lighter on me that day, and it stuck. I even use it. I'm like, I'm really tired. I got a death hangover. And like everybody gets it. They
I get
understand what that
sickness.
is.
John is an amazing guy. For 20 plus years, he's been like my brother. Whenever I need something, though I'll never take anything, he'll offer it to me. And I 1000% appreciate it, John. Always love
Oh,
you.
thank you.
Love you to death.
Same, my friend.
That's how we met, Zach, through Hay House 22
Okay.
years ago.
At that point, you both had a personality, or you had a reputation, I guess we'll say. Did you guys both think, oh my God, is this going to suck, or is this going to be cool? Or were you just both kind of like, let's just go for it and see what happens?
No, I wasn't nervous about meeting Frank. I had worked out and had trainers before. I'm like I need a babysitter kind of person. I need to be accountable to someone. I've been better, to be honest. But in my early training days, self-motivated when it came to physical health. I spent so much time on other stuff that I almost felt like cookies were my reward. The symbol to what I created is a cookie. That should tell you my mindset. And being raised Italian, food was everything for me. So I know that he understood where I was coming from. And although immensely funny and sarcastic in who he is as a personality, I recognized his passion to make a difference. I think that's what I resonated with. He made me accountable, but he also understood who I was as a person. It wasn't just do this amount of reps and this set with this weight. It was today it's going to be different. Today we're going to do cardio first. He knew intuitively what I needed in a way that I couldn't understand. So there's an immense respect for someone that comes to you with their knowledge and shares it, right? So although I was a client and we were becoming friends, there was a mutual respect, and I learned from him, he learned from me, and we laughed a lot, right? He makes serious things fun. There was a moment where he asked me to write the foreword for his book, and I remember I laughed. He asked me a number of times, and every time he asked me, I laughed because I thought he was trying to motivate me so that I could write the foreword for his book. I used to basically say, I think it was your ab book, right? I remember saying, I'm going to have abs for my 30th birthday. They've been on back order now for 25 years. But the reality is that was the book he asked me for. And then I think it was like 2 weeks to your due date. You had like 2 weeks to get it submitted. You got really serious with me and you were like, so are you okay to do it, or do you not want to do it? And I'm thinking, I don't even know what we're talking about right now. Is it a new exercise I don't want to do? You were like, and I said, I need a little more clarity on what you're asking me. That was the first moment that I knew you were serious. You know, every actor, actress, model, sports person on the planet. I don't even have abs. Why are you asking me to write your ab book? What you said to me resonated forever. You basically said to me, you understand the principles of what goes into needing it. If you wanted them, you would have them. You can achieve that. You have the knowledge and everything that's in there, and you can speak to the people that are in the same spot.
That's right.
And it wasn't like, listen, fat ass, you could have abs if you want them. It was more like, you actually get it. And I was like, and I did. And I still do. This is the closest I've come. Almost there.
I've never been one to use celebrity relationships or what have you to push my own agenda, because you train people all the time and you don't become friends with them. You become friendly, but you don't become friends. This is a guy who's living what I'm teaching. Here's a guy who's going through the trials and tribulations of what everybody else is. During that time, he was on, I believe you were on what, John, channel 4, which channel were you on for
Crossing Over? We were on, every night we were on the Sci-Fi Channel, and then it got syndicated. And in New York alone, we were on CBS for a while, and then we switched to Fox.
So he was incredibly busy. So I understood what he was going through. Plus, you have your family, you have your business, because I was going through the same thing, like with infomercials and everything else. When I had my kickoff, we simulcast, I believe it was like 20,000 people in there. John was there in the back, hiding, listening. Went out the back. I was supposed to speak for like 15 minutes. I think I did 90 minutes.
You over-deliver. That's good.
Yeah. But that was the reason why, because you have to live it. I think it's just fake if you use a name to put it up there. So for me, it was about someone actually going through it. To this day, we still bounce stuff off of each other.
I have a question for both of you, actually, because it's unique where you both come from, in that you're in a position where people want things from you all the time, whether it's time, money, reading, training advice. How do you manage that without going crazy on somebody? Are you used to it, or do you prepare yourself for it, or is it just you're skeptical about who you want to become friends with or who you want to open up to?
Well, if we're talking about from a personal zone, that is a very small circle of people for me. By nature of getting older, just not wanting to overextend in places that maybe in the past you have. For the people watching, I'm a Libra. Libras are known for being fair and balanced, but we're also really blunt. And sometimes people can't handle the direct or bluntness of like, I'm not doing that, or I don't want to go. I'm really good with boundaries. Over 40 years of doing this work, energy wise, it's really important to learn to create boundaries because in my world, everybody's got a story and everybody thinks that their story is the most important story. And I never want to minimize that person's story.
Right.
So it's my job to recognize, how do I create opportunities for me to interact with these people that are fair? It used to be that I would have people call my office the first Wednesday of the month between 7 and 10 p.m. And whoever got through on the phone lines got on my waiting list. That was organized chaos, but it gave the opportunity for, if you're supposed to get through, you're getting through. And that was like that for a long time. And then my waiting list got ridiculously long when I was doing the TV show, because I didn't really think the show was going to be successful. I know, as psychic as I am, I just didn't think that, I don't know, I didn't really think it was going to be successful. That was my own insecurities of, who would want to watch me on TV kind of a thing. So I wasn't being psychic, I was being human. And my waiting list became 8 years long. And it was a little bit overwhelming. Because I'm somewhat OCD, I had to go in order of the people that called in. So I didn't jump the line in anybody. I went in order as they called because I felt like that was fair. So I did that.
Yeah. Let me jump in. John puts this Libra force field around himself where some people just won't come near him. So when I was training with him, they thought, well, he's always laughing and smiling. Let me try to go through him. So this guy came up to me, and like John said, everybody has a story, and his was horrible, like about his son's passing. And he said to me, he's like, I'll give John $15,000 to do a reading right now. And I said, look, he does not deviate from his list. And I went up, I told John, and he said, I will not, I can't. I feel sorry for him and his family, but I'm not deviating from my list. This is my process. Because you would think some people, if they were a fraud or if they were just kind of like, oh, I want to make a quick buck, they would have a quick conversation with them. And I remember, John, I asked you, and I said, what would happen if you did that? And you're like, you didn't want to mess with it spiritually, you said, or something of that.
I remember I came home one night and Sandra was sitting at the kitchen table and she was emotional and she had all these letters in her hand. I was like, what's going on? And she's like, you need to call these people first, and then you got to call these people. She goes, then you got to get these people in. I was like, whoa. I was like, you can't be reading that, number one. And number two, you can't get involved. There is a process of how those people will be responded to. Number one, I can't know anything about the person. If I know something about your story, I don't want to read you because now I don't have a blank slate to work with. If I have all that information, it makes my job harder because, well, now I know that. So, and this is a real experience. I'm reading for a person, and his mom comes through, and his mom kept repeating one thing throughout the entirety of the reading. She kept going, "This is my appointment. This is my appointment." So I said to the guy, "Your mom's saying that you're here for her. This is her appointment." And he nodded. Normally, information comes through, the client validates it, you move on to the next thing. That doesn't get repeated again. It would be like somebody going, "Hi, I'm Frank." Okay. Yeah. "Hi, I'm Frank." So she must have brought that up like 4 or 5 times. So finally, at the end of the session, I said to him, just curious, from a personality standpoint, was your mom a repeater of things in life? Would she repeat something over and over again? And he looked at me and he goes, "No, not really." "Why?" I go, "Well, she kept saying throughout our time together, 'This is my appointment.'" And I said, "And I told you that at the beginning." And you like, "Yeah." I go, "So I don't know why she kept bringing it up. 'This is my appointment.'" And he said, "Because it was." And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I don't mean any disrespect, but I don't know who you are." He goes, "I don't know anything about you." He goes, "My mom just died, as you know." And I went, "Okay." He goes, This was her appointment that she was on your waiting list for years. I'm assuming she was coming to you because she wanted to talk to my dad, but she actually passed. So I saw in my mom's appointment book, call this date and time, confirm appointment with psychic John Edward, and he kept the appointment. So when she kept saying this was my appointment, it was actually, and she was on my list that long that she actually passed.
Talk about like, because people think when you're a psychic, you see the whole picture. You see signs. You don't see the Magna Carta coming down all lifting. It's signs and different things that you see, right?
If I saw the actual Magna Carta, I would think somebody was a historian. It's all symbolic, right? The way the deaf community communicates is through ASL. They communicate through sign language. So it's a symbolic form of communication. A lot of people in life communicate through emojis in their texts. That's a symbolic form of communication. This is like an energetic emoji kind of conversation using the medium's frame of reference. So anything that I've experienced, like if I was in the middle of a reading and I saw Frank Seppi, I would not say, is there a Frank? I would immediately go to somebody who was in fitness. And then I would go to other things that I would understand about Frank as an analogy, as a quick get me to say that, right? How do they get me to say this? Well, it's like going through the file cabinets of my memories, my experience. And then that's what that means to me. And that's what I say. So I feel like they open up a book and I read a paragraph of their energy. I don't know what comes before it or after it, but I know what I'm seeing. And I know that in my frame of reference, that's what this would mean. So I'm not omniscient. I only know what I know. I know what I'm being shown. I've had people literally confess things to me because they think I know everything. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't know that, but I'll keep your secret.
Right.
Especially when the show first started, I had so many people. I actually had to say to somebody once, you understand I'm not a priest, right? There's no confession, there's no penance, but I will keep your secret.
Do you ever have somebody try to come up and like do a gotcha? I feel like a lot of people nowadays do it via TikTok or Instagram, but has that happened to you?
Well, you have to understand, I have an entire episode of South Park dedicated to me where I am the biggest douche in the universe. Starting at that benchmark, I've had a number of people try to debunk. Here's a fun story. HBO was doing a documentary called America Undercover: Life After Life. They hired Linda Ellerby's production company, Lucky Duck Productions, to do the documentary. I think it was in 1999 that they did this. It was before Crossing Over, and Crossing Over was in 2000. That's when that started. Anyway, long story short, I was told by a number of people, don't do this documentary. And I'm like, why? And this one medium said, well, they're going to try to expose mediums as a fraud. And I go, yeah, but they have a scientist that's like Harvard and Yale trained that wants to do double-blind studies like in a laboratory environment on this subject matter. How do I not do that? Like, I kind of feel like I have to do that. I've been doing this work for all these years, and now somebody legitimately wants to study you and they want to do a documentary about that. The medium told me I'm not doing it. So I just thought maybe they didn't invite that medium, that they weren't invited. So I went to the director and the executive producer. I'm like, was this person asked to be a part of this? And they were like, yeah, like 3 times. And they said no. I was like, really? Because that was shocking for me. I thought that person would have been front and center. I want to do this. And when all was said and done, it was a really good documentary. It was fair, balanced, critical where it needed to be critical, and brought up perspective. It was a great thing to be a part of. It was a great thing to do double-blind studies and to be tested. There was a book written about it called The Afterlife Experiments for anybody who wants to know about the science. I was part of 4 studies. 3 of them were official double-blind studies where in science you have to replicate and extend data points. Fast forward years later, I'm friends with a very well-known celebrity who used to have poker nights, and I would go to her poker nights. Linda Ellerby happened to be at one of them. She turned around to me one night and she said, do you know the backstory on that documentary? And I went, no. She's like, yeah, we were hired to expose you guys as frauds. And I went, oh. And she goes, well, we couldn't. And I said, okay. And I said, what changed it? She goes, we met you. And I went, no, seriously, what changed it? And she said, we met you. She goes, and once we hit you, she goes, we had to go back to Sheila Nevins, who was in charge of HBO, and said, we can't produce the documentary you asked us to, but we'll produce a documentary on what our discovery is. And that's what they did. And I thought that was such an upstanding journalistic approach to the subject
Yeah.
matter.
It wouldn't happen today.
I don't know if it would. I really
Today's
don't.
climate.
And also speaking, let me be really clear. It wasn't like I saved the documentary. It was, I think, the conversations that I had
Right.
with the directors and the producers, not just my reading, because the other mediums on there were absolutely amazing and scored off the charts. That was what the like owner of the company had said. I think you're right. I think that where we are today, we're in a polarized world, and
Mm-hmm.
everything is now team oriented. So it's like you're either, you're this or you're that. And I'm like, nobody's just that. I cannot
No.
like this and still understand that there's tenets of it that are truth. There could be things that are true and overall I don't like it. So I always come from the energetic place, right? People want to know, like, well, what have you learned in 4 decades of doing this? I'm like, it's really simple. Be kind, right? Live a spiritual life. That doesn't mean be religious. Live a spiritual life. Put unity, community, and humanity first, because anything that takes away from that is going to take away from what our experiences are. And that is the litmus test I live my life by. If something's not positive for people or humanity or community, then that's my litmus test to pull away from that. I think it's been good for me my entire life, because that's how I come up with my boundaries, whether it comes to people that are believers or not believers. When somebody says to me that they don't believe in what I do, I go, okay, it doesn't change me. Like when somebody says to me, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God. Okay, it doesn't take away from my belief that there is one. So I think perspective and creating boundaries, and I think anybody that's listening to this podcast who are seekers, are looking to understand how to create a better place in their own existence, you have to have boundaries, right? You're going to go out with people who are not going to follow the diet that you're following. And they're going to be like, oh, come on, you can do that. Well, no, they could do that, but you can't. So having those boundaries are important, and then letting stuff roll off you when someone's got an opinion. So, and I know that's something that I've seen with Frank, where, you represent the mirror of what they don't want to look at. So I've had a lot of people shift away from me because they are afraid that I'm going to see something that they're doing that's wrong. So therefore, that becomes a deflection.
I can see that intimidation on both sides, being intimidated by Frank because he's in the shape he is and he has the knowledge he has, intimidated by you because they don't want you to see something in them that they're afraid of or that they're self-conscious about. So I totally understand that. I wouldn't have put it together, but I get it now.
I go by personal experience too, because I met John. I didn't know anything about psychic. My mom was big into Wiccan, and she had psychics come over the house when I was younger. I thought it was pretty cool, but I didn't really know anything about it. I just knew him as a person, but I had all the outside people tell me he probably has microphones in the audience and this and that. And then when I went to Australia and Hawaii, whatever, I was with John and other people the whole day until 5 minutes before the show, until he actually went on stage. So where was he getting this information when we were hiking up a hill in Hawaii an hour and a half before the show, or eating roasted chicken in Australia when he's going on the show? And it was funny. John, do you remember the one thing you said to me? You were like, we were training and you were leaving, you like, don't go on any boats.
Yes, I do remember that.
Don't go on any boats. You have a
I said, be
yellow
careful.
warning sign. Yeah, you have a yellow warning sign. And I'm like, why am I going on a boat? So my brother calls me up and he has a boat. And he goes, you come out on a boat? And I go, no. He goes, why not? I go, because John told me. He goes, oh, God, give me a break. So at the time, I was working for ESPN. And I went to doing an NFL workout with this famous linebacker for the New York Giants. And they were going to throw me a pass and he was going to cover me. Well, I zigged, went past him, caught it, and I was celebrating a little bit too much. On the next pass, I went out, he stomped the top of my foot and broke the little bone in my foot, which John said, watch your leg, and you have a yellow warning light, boat. Well, I was at Chelsea Piers, and I was like, ah. Okay.
That's when Frank was like, oh, this is symbolic. This is a symbolic thing.
I get it now. I'm like, all right, that makes sense. So I was like, wow, I'll never forget that too. Because I asked one of the, and it's funny because I was training Jumbo Elliott at the time for the New York Giants, and I go, yeah, the guy stepped on my foot by accident. He goes, no, you idiot. He goes, that's how you cover people in the NFL, to slow you down. I go, yeah. He goes, That's why. He goes, he stomped on top of your foot to slow you down. Okay, makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I mean, I
Zach,
go by personal experience. I
it's
remember Bev Francis in a gym. Bev Francis, Powerhouse Gym. And
Mhm.
John was like, "Do you mind if I say something to her?" And I'm like, I don't think she minds. John came up with this weird name of one of her relatives that passed, and she happened to be very close with Bev. There's no way you could Google this woman. She's probably like at the time like 100 years old, whatever. But Bev's eyes lit. She started crying right there on like
Wow.
right there in the gym, and I was like, wow, this is deep.
Bev and I had a conversation. I knew she was open to the subject matter, and I had permission to be able to, do
Right,
that
right,
because
right. Yeah.
I would never approach anybody like and ambush
No,
them. It's never okay
no,
to enter someone's vibration without their consent. But you know what's I think interesting also, Frank, that our worlds are similar because the grief that people experience on my side of things is what helps them sometimes find 30 extra pounds, right? They eat
yeah,
their feelings. After somebody goes through a loss, they find themselves physically not in a good spot. And then that leads now to feeling even worse and they spiral in a different way. When we talk about life changes and how energy works, how it manifests with people, if you can be in control of that energy, it helps you in every aspect of your life.
Do you ever feel like it's a burden? Do you ever feel like it's so heavy to take this? Is there a time where you're like, I wish I didn't have this?
No, I feel very blessed that I have the ability that I have. I feel a great deal of responsibility with
Mhm.
it and how it can be utilized. I have been offered more money than you could possibly imagine. I left television in 2008 because I wanted to teach more and I knew TV wasn't going to let me teach. So I decided to create an online world in 2008 when that didn't even exist. We had to
Yeah.
build everything out. Frank was
yeah.
there the entire time. He knew how much it cost. Like it almost bankrupt me. It was a really big deal. I had somebody from the West Coast who recognized what I built and they had $1 bazillion and they were into the psychic hotline world, the whole Miss Cleo days. And that was like
Yeah.
a $1 bazillion industry. The guy said, I will buy this and take you out of debt. You won't have to work again. I want the name and you to front it. I just remember thinking, I may lose my house, but I can't do that. I can't do that. So, I have such a respect, a reverence for the work, a fear of like being slammed by the universe. It was a very, very crazy time. I couldn't do it. So for me, it's not a burden, it's a responsibility, but it's a blessing. And when you can sit with someone and watch the lights go on in their eyes because they recognize that person they love is still with them and that they're still there. Somebody that's listening to this right now who might be grieving the loss of a loved one, they don't need a read. Nobody needs a reading. So like nobody needs to come to me for reading. Nobody needs a medium. They need an understanding. And if they could just know that their mom, their dad, their brother, whoever that person is still with them, still connected to them. They still have access to you. You don't need a medium to tell you that. Like nobody needs to go get a reading. They need to
Yeah.
get an understanding. I think that was the reason why Frank asked me to write the forward to his book, because I had the
Mhm.
understanding. I didn't need the abs. I had the understanding. Because with the understanding, you can make all the changes. And that's been
Uh,
my goal for 40 years.
when you get a sign of something really big that's going to happen, like a 9/11 or
Mm.
something, how do you mentally deal with that, knowing that this is coming and there's nothing you can do about it to stop it? And I'm just using 9/11 as an example. I'm saying obviously there's other things,
Right.
but yeah, just how do you mentally deal with knowing that a disaster is going to happen, but there's nothing you can do about it?
Well, if I'm working with a client, if I'm getting that information, then I know that I'm getting it so that I can help them navigate it or
Hmm.
help them maybe for the first time discuss it.
Yeah.
If it's a global event, sometimes it is really, really hard. I call them the D and Gs. It's the D and G. It's the doom and gloom. And it is a overwhelming feeling of despair that kind of comes over me. It's really, really hard when it happens because it doesn't always lift right away.
Yeah.
And you have to go like, I'm feeling this, but am I feeling it psychically or am I feeling it because I slipped into depression? I can't
Yeah.
use my ability as an excuse. Like maybe I'm depressed, but over the years, every time that happens, there's a very big event that's taken place. And I feel we're in a place now where I think humanity is being tested on a global scale, where
Yes.
people are being asked to choose teams. So I'm like, okay, if there's got to be a team, I got to be team humanity. And I think it's really important for people to read between the lines everywhere. That takes me back to being a critical thinker, because everybody's got a bias. I was doing a Long Island event and somebody said, the hospital killed my relative. I had to stop the event and say to the entire room, first and foremost, before I make my next statement, I need you all to know I have a bias. My bias is that I come out of healthcare. So
Hmm.
that is the lens upon which I'm going to answer this question and then back it up with the information. The reality was their relative passed from COVID. And as a result of having COVID, they went into sepsis. The family was blaming the hospital, but they had COVID.
Yeah.
So we all have biases. People have biases when it comes to sporting events, right? They have an
Hmm.
innate hate for a team because of where they come from. But it's a little bit reckless to apply that same philosophy if you're applying it to a political party, right? In my entire life, I've never been Frank knows this. Like, I was politically illiterate up until 2016. And then you become educated and have a different opinion. So there's certain things I won't do anymore. Like, I won't go on certain shows. Like, you make different choices because what's my litmus test? Always, what's going to be best for humanity? What's going to be best for people, community? Everything I do is going to be through a lens of looking at that, but also being respectful that people have different perspectives and biases that brought them to the place that they're at. I think it's always about trying to find that kind of balance in every area that we're living in.
I got
Gotcha.
a question for both you guys, but are you happy? Are you both happy? Like, in if you are, what makes you happy?
So I'll give Frank a moment. I think everything in life is a spectrum. And to say I'm happy would not be the right way to define that. I think I have to say where I'm at in my life, I am content with what I've achieved, and that can make me happy.
Right.
But I think we fluctuate. Everybody as a person fluctuates. So where we are right now recording this, am I happy? Yeah, I could say I'm pretty content and happy.
Yeah.
An hour ago, was I happy? No. An hour ago, I wasn't happy because I was having to deal with something that didn't make me feel good, right? I don't think we can live with blanket
Yeah.
statements from a feeling standpoint, specifically with grief, because
Yeah.
grief comes in waves. If anybody is listening to this right now and you're in the first year of loss, you're in what I refer to as the coasting year, where you're going to get support from people that you're connected to. And you're going to go from month to month, holiday to holiday. And you'll have people that are like, oh man, you just lost your mom. You just lost your dad. I'm going to be there for you. And they are. Then the second year comes around. And that second year is like a 10-foot wave that knocks you up the beach sideways and you don't see it coming. And then you don't have the same support from the people around you. And you may question, like, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm worse this year than I was last year. I've already done the first birthdays. I've already done the first holidays. If you're that
Hmm.
person listening to this, there's nothing wrong with you. Give yourself that understanding that grief is like that same question, are you happy? You have moments of being okay, and then you're not. So I think we got to ride the waves of, how do I define my state? How do I define my condition? I remember one time saying to Frank, like, I had a really bad, like, I fell off the wagon and I cheated. And you were like, what happened? And I was like, well, I cheated for the entire weekend. And he said, well, why not a cheat meal? Like, why couldn't it
Yeah.
be a cheap meal?
Right.
And I was like, okay. I had a way of reframing it, because what I heard in that moment was, I can have a cheap meal, right? Well, I'm here to tell the person that's grieving, it's okay that you had a meltdown in your car. It's okay that you flip out over something because your emotions got to you and you saw something, that car in the parking lot, that license plate. You heard that song and it put you over the edge. So you
Hmm.
had that moment, you had a meltdown. Now come back from it. Don't live in that spot. Give yourself permission to feel so that you can heal. And that means you got to deal with what you're feeling.
I would say, Mama said, life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. Honestly, doing a real deep dive into myself and how I react to things. I'm happiest when I'm making other people happy. That's just the way I operate. I like to live in chaos to the where I'm on the edge with multiple things going on. But if I really look back, when am I the happiest? When I'm making other people happy. So whether it's through a conversation, whether it's something I did for them or whatever, that's what makes me happy. The happiest thing this month was having a conversation with a woman who had cancer and was wanted to get back to the gym. I helped her, and she was very thankful. And another guy came up to me and he's like, "Hey, you know, I lost 30 pounds because of you giving away stuff that I have to people." That's when I'm the happiest. So yeah, just the way I am.
But it's also in compartmentalizing stuff, right? If you say, "Are you happy?" immediately
Sometimes.
you go to the place of, well, if I think about my kids, I'm beyond ecstatic. I'm the happiest person on the planet because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't get happier for me. Sitting with my kids and just being with them and
Mhm.
listening to a conversation, I'm beyond happy. That is like the angel singing kind of happy.
Yes.
But that's not 24/7, right?
No.
So that's what I'm saying. Like we have to recognize the fluctuation in where we are. You know, am I happy with where am I at professionally? No, because I always feel like I can be doing more. Like I always want to
Yeah.
be able to do more. Like somebody said to me, Why are you still working?" And I don't understand. They were like, "You could just do your privates and you don't have to do Evolve. Why have you been doing that?" And I was like, uh, that's kind of like my purpose. Like
Right.
I
Yeah.
feel like I was put here to, like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It was
Well,
such a weird, it was a,
supposed to be complacent. You know what I
But
mean? Like,
but
yeah.
I get
I
where
mean,
it's
you're
coming
supposed to be.
from.
Well, who's happy 24 hours a day? Nobody.
But that's
Yesterday, I took my
foolish. You
son to
can't.
get his hair done, and that was cool. I was happy at that moment watching him because he was happy. Got his hair done. He liked the cut, the way it came out. Like having lunch, the little things with my parents. That was fun. But who the hell's happy smiling all day long?
No,
It's an
I don't think that
impossibility.
that's. I'm with you. I don't think that's realistic. But
Yeah.
I also understand where people are coming from because I don't think they, just what you said, John, I don't think they look for purpose. And
right.
I think
No.
for a while I didn't either. I was just like, okay, what am I good
Zach, what's
at?
your
Or what
birthday?
can I get that there's a time where I feel like I didn't, I was just trying to figure out where I fit and where my skill set fit. Whereas it's more important now as I'm realizing, and also being exposed to people who are going after what they're passionate about, doing the best you can that makes you happy. With my kids, I'm insanely happy. But I always feel like I could be doing better with them, with my wife. I feel like I could be a better husband. And yeah, professionally, no. I am always, and Frank knows this because I talk to Frank every single day about what can I do? I want to do better. I want to help people. I want to have an impact. So I get it. That's why I like to ask folks like yourselves what that means and how you achieve it because I'm still striving personally to get to that middle ground.
Yeah. Let me give you this, Zach, with the protein treat, with Zepi
Yes.
Nutrition. There are days when you're passionate about growing a business. The other day we got Australian distribution. Are
Mhm.
you happy? No, because you want the whole world. And that's the way
Right.
you have to think. Creating something, it's great, check it off, but keep going. Some people get like I knew a guy, he had a protein line, he was very exclusive to GNC. And I said to him, this is not going to last. Diversify, put it here, 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 get mass distribution. 6 months later, 60% of his business was gone. Had to fire all these people and everything else. When it comes to professional, and John's the same way. John's been doing this, like you said, for 35, 40 years, but he knows there's more he wants to do. And when you enjoy something that you do, you don't want to let it go,
Plus, I want to be
but you
better.
want to make it
Like I want,
better.
yeah,
Yeah,
I want to be better. Like I feel like
yeah,
I'm still a student. I'm still learning. There's so much stuff. This year, I have a goal. I wanted to challenge myself. So I'm learning sign language. I want to become fluent enough in sign language that I can read for the deaf community if I needed to.
Yeah.
Nobody asked me, but I want to do that because there have been a number of times where people that are hearing impaired come to my events and I need to get an interpreter for them. Right now, do I think that I can interpret for them the entire time? No, but it would be more personal for that person who's hearing impaired to look at the person doing the reading and have me directly sign to them, that's a goal. That started in 1989, Zach. I went to the
Wow.
Milneck School for the Deaf, and
Oh,
my
wow.
mom was diagnosed with cancer in the middle of it, and I had to stop. It's been in the back of my head since 1989. My daughter had to take ASL in school, and she started
Hmm.
doing it with me. It reignited that desire to do it.
Mhm.
And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm doing it slowly, but I'm doing it. And I'm saying it publicly. So I'm keeping myself accountable by saying it publicly. I think it's important to always be a student, right? Like be a student of the world that you're in, or
Yeah.
be a student of the universe. So I have a question for you.
Sure.
So are you a Cancer or a Gemini?
Yes, I'm a Cancer.
Have you had your chart done and you're a Cancer?
I just typed it in a couple times and it said,
and it came up there.
Yeah.
So this should be interesting because the energy of stagnation will be shifting because the planet Mars just went direct in your sign. And I know that because I'm following the astrology through Evolve. Frank, I have to get him on Evolve so that he could listen to the astrology stuff. Because as a Cancerian, you've had a rough few months.
That's true. Yes.
Hang tight. You've got a few more months to go. Things are going to shift. If you look at the astrology, and this is just me not reading you, this is me giving you information from what I know. Right. The astrology is a little bit wonky for March. The next couple of months, Cancerians are going to feel a little more relief, but you probably have felt panic and inertia for the last couple of months. What the astrologers say is that Mars is the planet of action, energy, and war, and it's been retrograde in Cancer, like being held back. So what do you do with that? You look at it and you reframe it. What also is an energy that's held back? When somebody's got a bow and arrow, when that bow gets pulled back, it creates tension. Imagine that you're the arrow, the tension's being released. Now use your vision to be able to focus. Where do you want that energy to go?
It's better than Capricorn's been in the dump since 16 years.
Frank can attest to that because there's definitely a lot of what you said is 100% accurate. And I'm not just saying it because we have these conversations over the past X amount of months. And like that has definitely been the feeling. And the whole feeling has been, we talk daily and we talk about moving forward and figuring this out. But yeah, there's definitely times where I feel like I'm on this treadmill.
Yeah.
You're going into a 3 personal year. In numerology, a personal year is a yearly vibrational pattern that goes from birthday to birthday. So your year would be June to June. Last June, your focus was on relationship dynamics. From June of last year to June of this year, you're basically working on who you are in relationship to everybody around you, right? Whether that's like family, romantic, kids, or business, right? You're learning your lessons through relationships and having to gain different perspectives. You're coming out of that now and you're getting ready to go into your next phase. As of June, your energy starts to shift and you're going into a 3-year. And a 3 personal year is about expansion. It's about planting seeds. It's about fertility. It's about lands like gardening, what's growing, but it's about artistic expression and taking on more responsibility. It's a time of growth. It's a time of expansion. So that's a good thing. You have good energy that's on the horizon for you right after your birthday, like expansion, taking on more. Cool. Just be careful not to take on too much. Don't spread yourself too thin.
I have a serious question. How pivotal of a role has Bugs Bunny played in your life?
Me? Who, me?
No, Zach.
Oh.
No,
I was like, huh? What,
so
you're a huge Bugs Bunny fan? Is that
I told somebody earlier, I said to a friend, I go, I'm doing Frank Seppi's podcast today, and I'm just trying to figure out at what point Bugs Bunny makes an appearance. I was like, will it be a direct question? I said, or will it be him saying, what a maroon? I think we bonded over Bugs Bunny.
Just be trained of like monsters are such interesting creatures. Gossamer. But is it okay to say your fake hotel or your fake name on the road that you use?
I don't use it anymore.
Oh, you don't use it? So John used a fake name so people couldn't track him down. Yeah. So because I remember checking in and I'm like, Frank Seppi, and he's like, Gordon Shumway. I'm like, Gordon Shumway?
One person ever got it. She was like, Gordon, it's like Gordon Shumway. And she went,
what a solid like pseudonym for the road. Wow. That's really good.
That is a great name, Gordon Shumway.
So, and you can see as serious I am about my subject matter, you could now maybe get an understanding how Frank and I have maintained, like, you know.
Absolutely. That's amazing. I definitely want to know more about these travels. I'm sure there's some fun stuff I want to know about.
We can't talk about it on air.
Right.
But
where can people find you? What is it that you got going on? Because I feel like you got a million things going on.
one of the things that I've been in the digital space since 2008, you know what they say about success or all the failures that you have along the way? I failed a lot when it came to digital platforms because seeing the future and knowing what it is and then trying to make it happen when people weren't ready for it was probably a bad thing. But we're now in a time where we could do stuff like this. So I created Evolve Plus, and if people go to evolveplusTV, there's a landing page, and it gives you an idea what's available channel-wise. I have a channel that I do all my stuff on. We have a channel called The Orbit, where there's an astrology podcast every week that my daughter hosts, and there's a new astrologer, and we get the updates for what the next week is. We have multiple creators that are verified on there, mediums like myself, psychics, tarot readers, astrologers. We have an entire channel for mindfulness called Mindless to Mindful, run by a California university professor. There's a lot of live streams. So kind of like people go live and it's interactive, and a place where there's no scammers, meaning like I don't have to worry about the 250 cloned accounts on Instagram, TikTok. You know, it's just overwhelming. If people want to check that out, they can check out evolveplusTV.com.
Look for the cookie.
Listen, I'll match your cookie with my
the protein
crispy marshmallow crispy nutrition. I get sad when I talk to John. We don't spend as much time together anymore, and we should be doing more business together, because you're supposed to surround yourself with people like-minded and you actually like, you know.
But here's the cool thing. I always feel like you're in my head, Frank. No matter where I go, no matter what I do, I always have like a little Seppiism in my head, or I have the moment, you know, what does Frank Seppi got to do? So there's a lot of inspiring things that have come through our connection and information and empowerment that not just helped me, but me as a dad being able to take your book, The Truth, and hand it to Justin and say, listen, you know, I didn't have anybody growing up to educate me about nutrition. You know, I thought pasta was healthy. Like, I thought that was a healthy food. Growing up, I was like, well, I'm eating pasta. Pasta's good for you. I didn't have anybody teach me about food. I didn't have anybody teach me about working out. So to be able to have the book, The Truth, in my house and the image, that is important. I know that Frank has inspired Justin, and that if Justin has questions, that he can go to The Truth and look at, you know, what's right or what's wrong. So, you know, I appreciate our connection because it's generational. Like it's helpful. And I'm still empowered by what you've taught me and what I know from you.
All right. What about our fight over roasted chicken in Australia?
Thank you guys.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much. It really was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.